Hello, my name is Seth Yavit. My favorite band is Interpol. My favorite movie is New York Stories. And those two things came together to help me get my favorite profession, which is art therapy. It's your favorite song, your favorite stuff, all your favorite stuff. It's my favorite thing. I love this and that. You're gonna get me to talk about it. Favorite stuff.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones. It is Sunday, March 28th. It's also the first full day of Passover, which is a spring holiday that I'm celebrating. Last night I had my first night Seder with my upstairs neighbor Ezra. Just the two of us going through a Haggadah. We had an amazing meal. I made pot roast. I've never made pot roast before. With some mashed potatoes. We grabbed our turkey stock from Thanksgiving and made matzo ball soup and turkey stock. And really just had a lovely night. And tonight I'm hosting a Zoom Seder for the kind of a crew that often comes to my house on second night Seder. This year, because of the mixed bag of who is vaccinated and who isn't, it's going to be like a new crowd of people on my Zoom Seder. And so as soon as I hit publish on this podcast, I'm going to go to Haggadot.com and make some adjustments to the Haggadah I use every year. So to demystify the words I'm using, Seder means order in Hebrew. It is the dinner that we have for Passover. It's a dinner with a clear order of operations. And the book that has your order, that has your Seder written out in it, is called a Haggadah. And Passover is the most widely celebrated Jewish holiday. It's a holiday that generally takes place just in the home. And every family has different traditions. My traditions are a lot of parody songs. So last night was a much more serious conversation. Tonight will be a little, I like to bring the silly to my celebration of Passover in appropriate ways. The interview this week, I recorded 1 week ago today. Seth Yavit is a therapist in the DC, Northern Virginia area. I will link to his professional profile if you know anyone looking for care in that tri-state area. He is available. He can make referrals. Seth and I took writing classes together with Kim Clark of blessed memory. We took classes together like 15, 20 years ago, not quite 20 years ago. And this is the conversation. This is the first time we've talked to each other on the phone or in person in probably 14 years. Like, it's been a long time since Seth and I talked. So this is when I opened up the file to edit today, this was a file that was 2 hours long. So I took some of the bigger tangents out, left some of the smaller tangents in, and it was just really fun to catch up. So without further ado, here is my interview with Seth Yavit. He's, again, an art therapist, narrative therapist in the DC area, but we knew each other from writing. Look, with all those COVID variations out there, we still have to keep wearing our masks, washing our hands, stay home if you can, and stay safe. Hello, and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and my new theme song was performed by tonight's guest. His name is Seth Yavit. He is an artist, therapist, and art therapist based in DC. But approximately 500 years ago, Seth and I met in a writing class in Chicago with the writing teacher Kim Clark of blessed memory. And Seth and I have been Facebook friends for a decade. We took the class together at the turn of this century, like truly 2003, 2004. Seth shot me a note on Facebook Messenger and said, "You're in my Facebook feed today. What's happening? What's up?" And I said, we could catch up through Messenger, or we could turn it into content for my podcast. So why don't you come on my podcast and we'll catch up in front of the whole world? So Seth, how are you doing today?
Hey, thank you very much for having. I'm good. I appreciate you inviting me on, and it's nice. I'm glad to see you're still kicking. You're still doing the creative stuff. It's nice to see that time didn't keep you from pursuing that. So
thank you. Yeah, it feels like, have I published any books? No, but I've kept making stuff. I think that's important.
Yeah. Me too. I think you and I are in the same boat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Seth and I met in a writing class in a tiny studio on Armitage Avenue.
I remember that.
Kim's rule for the class, because we started in like an 8-week program.
Yeah.
And he said, the number one rule is you can't introduce yourself with your job. And then, So like none of us knew what the other people did until the last night of class. Me, you, Ashki, and whoever else was in the class.
Ashki.
Yeah.
I remember Ashki.
I haven't seen her. Hi, Spidey. In a long time, but she's still in Chicago.
Is she? I know. Yeah, I know nothing about that girl. I didn't even keep up with her.
Yeah.
So she's still. That's good news.
Yeah. But we went out to a bar after our final class of the original 8, and we're like, okay, what do you do? Right. And then we kept writing with Kim then for another year or so.
Yep. And I was there longer than you. I think I was there longer. It was what was that guy's name? Not Gabe. Who was that guy who was there? He was like really, he was a big dude. He was like tall and he had big features. What was that guy's name?
I only remember you and Ashki. I don't remember anyone else.
I thought his name was Gabe. Anyway, okay.
I'm sure he's in the recesses of my Gmail account.
Well, Ashki was. Oh, I thought you were going to say your mind. Gabe, because that's where Ashki was. I didn't even think of that. I haven't thought about that person since we actually had the class.
Yeah.
Wasn't she the one who used to get migraines, and the only thing that would help her was listening to Portishead? Wasn't that her? Did she ever tell you that? She said, I get these terrible migraines, and the only thing that helps me is Portishead, which I plan on using in my therapy when this is my non-medical, non-professional opinion, along with things like a friend of mine from India said that her children get, what do you call it when you get itchy skin, that area where you get itchy skin?
Like hives?
No, it gets bumpy and stuff.
So one of the things that's kind of wild, because when you said, are you still at the ice cream parlor? Which means you knew me before I converted to Judaism.
That's true. And the thing I read before I sent you a message was the text I sent you when I found out that you converted to Judaism.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of silly.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is it? Go Jewish shopping? Like me and you go shopping for Jewish men or something like that?
Yeah.
You wanna?
What?
Did you wanna?
Did I want to go shopping for Jewish men?
Listen, I don't know. I am possibly less Jewish than you right now, so I will. You might help me. You might end up finding me somebody actually. So, but if you want any if you want any help from a totally unskilled, unfamiliar Jewish guy, which probably won't get you anywhere, just please let me know. And
Yeah, if you know Jewish men over the age of 40 who are ready to settle
okay.
down but don't need to have biological kids with their wife, or like
Hmm.
they're divorced and they're a dad and they want a good stepmom, and they don't mind, like, I'm super involved in my synagogue. I'm a convert, so I'm like, I went all in, which is not a great way to meet Jewish men.
It's
Like,
not a great way.
converting and being all in on being Jewish but also being liberal is a terrible way to meet liberal Jewish men.
You see, let me tell you something. I think Jewish folks are like they're different all around the place. Is that what it's like in Chicago? Is that your deal in Chicago? Because
Yeah.
I'm not in Chicago anymore.
Yeah.
DC is a totally liberal city. People here are all in on being liberal, so it doesn't really work like that in Chicago.
Well,
Huh?
it's the not politically liberal, although I am politically liberal.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
people who identify as reform,
Oh, oh,
like that they're
oh,
in the
you're not
reform
conservative.
movement.
I see. You're not conservative. You're more on the. I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
like
forgot
I'm
what I was.
president
It
of a
was like
reform synagogue. Men who want to date women who are this into being Jewish want to date
yeah,
Orthodox women.
I see.
They don't want to date
That's
like people, like I appear secular to the world. So like secular Jewish guys, like I'm like
yeah.
I've turned into Charlotte from Sex and the City, and I never wanted to be her, but I'm like her.
Now you might have to just to know you can know what the next step is.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, Charlotte. I need a little character study here. I need
Yep.
you to be Charlotte. Help me out. I don't know
Yeah.
what the hell's going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you said that because when I went to Israel about 4 years ago,
Yeah.
and nobody would talk to me. I'd like nod or just like say hello in like a very gentle way. I think like in America, it's like you're Ashkenazi or you're Sephardic, right? Those are like the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
main two groups. But in Israel, it's a bit of an advanced study in Jews because
Yeah.
you just walk.
The diversity of people in Israel is phenomenal.
But just amongst Jewish people, I
Yeah.
found that and it was possible too that I was a tourist. I mean, let's be honest. I mean that's a country that has a lot of feelings about the outside world and itself, and it's not a very simple situation there.
Yeah.
And I think so. I think even within it, it was quite an experience to be. The nicest person I met there was, or the person who was nicest to me in terms of speaking to me and just actually willing to take the time and just chat because that's what I really wanted because it was lonely. Was a
Yeah.
Palestinian girl who was just talking about life, and we sat on the Mediterranean and just talked about funny things and but it was strange that people who are of my own religion, it was a lot more difficult to meet or connect with those folks. It was an interesting experience, and
Were you there on like a short How long were you there for, or what was the context of the trip?
I was there for 10 days, and I
Yeah.
thought I've never gone. I had a desire to go. I actually did want to go to meet a woman. I did want to go to meet somebody who maybe I could keep up with them, or uh, I've been having these. I think not to get too into it, but in the last few years, I actually, well, not few, in the last like maybe 5 or 6 years, I've had this desire to, kind of meet someone and settle down with someone that's Jewish. And so it was part of an attempt. And I did things while I was there, some really cool things actually while I was there to try to make that happen. And
Yeah.
I mean, to be completely honest, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell happened to me when I was there. I did things like I meditated in front of the Western Wall,
Mm-hmm.
and I had some really interesting experiences while I was walking in the hills. I walked like 5 kilometers. I think I must have gotten drought, like when you walk a lot, you get not tired, but just a little kind of out of it. I was walking in the sunshine. I was
Yeah.
heading towards this like a burial site of someone who, you go there and you make a wish and you
Mm-hmm.
wish for things. And so I got kind of delusional and had some really interesting things happen to me, which those weren't delusional themselves, but they felt very other than.
Time has a different feeling. Time can have a different feeling in Israel, and like time and space. So I think
When did you go?
I've been probably 14 times.
To Israel?
Yeah.
Good.
I've been almost every year since I converted. Not
Good.
this past year because of COVID. And I
Right.
think in 2012, I didn't go.
Hmm.
But yeah, sometimes when you go, my favorite, I love to go walk the old city on Shabbat, but like at night, like after dinner,
Mm-hmm.
like late at night through the old city in Jerusalem
Mm-hmm.
in the winter when it's like the stone is wet and it's been raining a little bit and it's got this special
Yeah.
smell.
It almost is like poetic almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went with some girlfriends up to Sfat one year, which is
I've been there.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
I,
so
tur-
Sfat is really like at a different
eh,
vibe, a different energy, yeah.
I turned 40 in Spot.
Ooh.
Yep. And which is, they say, if you want to follow the mystic
Yeah.
Kabbalah, if you want to follow that, they only accept you after 40.
Yeah.
I had all these amazing experiences there. I think what I appreciated there, because I didn't know anybody and nobody would talk to me, is I found myself as like sort of like on a sort of like a vow of silence trip, which actually
Yeah.
was fine. I mean, I think it helped me. I think something happens after you have to take a vow of silence. You just leave society behind. So much of society is conversation, and it's just
Mhm.
I really didn't have conversation was not. I didn't get the benefit of that as much as I wanted to. I did get set up with some friends, friends of friends, but it was like one night out of all 7 days. I was 7 or 10 days. Well, about
Yeah.
7 or 8 days I was there. Other than that, it was very conversations with people in the market. Uh, even asking people for directions. People were not very kind.
Yeah.
And I did it in Tel Aviv, so I think people may have just been drunk. I remember when it was, so I didn't go, I went to one club, it felt very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
for whatever reason. And so I remember leaving the club and I just remember I saw this group of folks. It was like three women and a dude. They were walking and I were walking up behind them and I just took a chance. I was like, hey, I'm new around here and I didn't know, would you guys hang out or something? And the guy looked at me and goes, do you want to sleep with her? And I was just like, well, this is quick. I don't know her. And then they all just like laughed at me and like walked off. And I was like,
Oh,
the hell? What just happened?
yeah.
They were like laughing as they walked off. And I'm like, this is like elementary school stuff.
Yeah.
I believe that it probably would have been better if I was knowledgeable about how to do certain things and how
Yeah.
to approach people. It's easy to make mistakes anywhere.
Yeah.
I think I just kept probably making mistakes
Mistakes, yeah.
over and over again.
But now your first trip to Israel is done, which means you can go back and like have a new experience.
I guess.
I eased in. If I had gone the first time on my own, I probably never would have gone back.
And that's that's kind of been the feeling for me is
Yeah.
even though I had a lot of these amazing experiences there, I didn't feel like I was welcome there, which, of course, I'm sure part of it was me and how I went. And I think that it would be a different situation if I went in a different way.
Yeah.
But that was part of my thought is like, I don't know if I want to go back. But again, I think it's silly to judge the whole thing and my whole future on one experience. I don't think that that's a very successful way to go about things.
Yeah.
I
But
would consider
what are you looking for in a partner?
I'm not really looking anymore. I,
No?
2019, 2020, 2021 has been a year of change and expectations, and it's been a year that I've gotten comfortable being by myself. So I'm really not anymore.
Yeah.
I was, but
Yeah.
when you make a trek to Israel and do a lot of excess things and connect with your higher power and find somebody, and then it falls apart. It's no longer
Mm,
for me. It's
yeah.
that's on top of being divorced and going through that whole thing and going through some of the more adult loss and
Yeah.
disappointment. I think I'm happy. I'm happy not looking,
Yeah.
but that's for me.
So we had talked, I said, I bring people on, they talk about their favorite thing.
Right.
And you expressed to me what a lot of my guests say, which is, well, how can I pick one favorite? And so you said that you zeroed in on a profession. So tell me, what is it that we're going to talk about today?
I wrote down what I wanted to tell you, and I think if I had to, it would be in my favorite profession, but I hit a lot of other favorites along the way because
Yeah.
a lot of those favorites went into giving me the power that I needed to make what I needed to make, to do what I needed to do, to now get me into my favorite profession.
Okay. So how about tell me what your favorite profession is, and then we'll time travel and we'll come back to it.
It's what I do now.
Okay.
So I work as a counselor therapist. I think my official title is psychotherapist.
Okay.
So that's my profession.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
you want me to travel back in time?
Let's travel back in time. You've written down some notes.
I did. I wrote down some notes.
Tell me where those notes start.
When I was 5.
Okay.
Okay. When I was 5, my father, who was a psychiatrist, had his MD. An accomplished individual, really accomplished actually. Graduated from the University of Chicago when he was 17.
Wow.
Yeah, went to, had a bunch of different degrees, went to Georgetown Medical School, and he worked at DC General. So the way that psychiatry used to work in DC was that DC was set up into quadrants.
Mm-hmm.
It's like quadrant A, and all these hospitals were in quadrant A. So I think there was like A through E. Well, he was the supervisor of quadrant E. So I think it was quadrant E. So I'm pretty sure it was DC General was in that mix. And so he took me to DC General when I was 5. I think he had to pick something up, or at least he had as an excuse, because my father was he was like a loving man, and he loved to, I think what he was trying to do, for as much as I remember him, and I don't remember him much because he was always working, was that I think he tried to involve me in his life, in his profession, because I think he had to, because so much of the time was spent on it. He was either working or he was home sleeping. I mean, this is a person that really worked a lot.
Yeah.
So what I remember was when I was 5, he took me to DC General, and I remember it fairly well. We were walking down the hallway, and a family either came towards us or we bumped into them, and they saw him, and they immediately said, like, Dr. Yavit, thank you so much for everything you've done for us. And the family was so complimentary, and I think they were even complimentary to me, where they said, your father's a great man, and he was. And at that moment, I mean, I remember saying, like, this is what I want to do. I was very, very moved, and even though I was 5, I understood enough of what was going on to know this is what I really wanted to do with my life. So that's where it started.
Because I mean,
Yeah.
the main thing I remember about, one of the main things I remember about you from our writing class is how you were using writing as a way to grapple with your father's death. Because your father was like such a big figure for you.
Well, it was his, yes, but it was his death that actually really messed with me.
Yeah.
I was in fifth. This is jumping ahead in time a little bit, but I was in fifth grade and we had just started the year, and I'm sitting in class, and all of a sudden I hear a little voice tell me that your father is dead.
Yeah.
And I remember wondering, first of all, what was going on, but second of all, if it was true.
Yeah.
And then I remember, and I think I covered this in the story I wrote in the class, because this is one of those things where I don't know if I'll ever be able to explain it, but I remember walking home and having a conversation with what I thought was, my higher power.
Yeah.
And I remember asking for signs and getting all of those signs. And I remember my neighbor came over, took me home with her and said, your mom is away. She'll be back soon. And I remember looking when she finally came and told me, like, your mom's home, go home. I remember looking out the window and seeing all the cars. And I was like,
And
wow,
you
really,
knew.
this is really, and I remember when my mom said, what happened to my father? And I think what I remember saying to her was, I know what happened.
Yeah.
So that was like, they say, write what you know, and it's ironic. I still don't know what that was, but I know what it was to experience it. That's the thing that affected me the most.
Yeah. Okay, so you're 5 years old, you're walking down the hallway with your dad at the hospital.
Right.
You see people make sure that he is a good man, he does good work, he makes a difference, and like, I want to do what dad does.
Mm-hmm. I graduate, so I go to college. My father passed away when I was 11, so I never really had a chance to interview him or talk to him, get advice from him.
Yeah.
So I graduate undergrad with a bachelor in sciences.
Mm-hmm.
I thought meant, all right, let's go be a psychiatrist. And people are like, wait a minute, you have to take history, you have to take biology, you have to take physics.
Yeah.
I remembered was I did not do well in those classes.
Mm-hmm.
I do not have the mind, or at least and everyone's like, oh, you could. And I'm like, you don't understand.
Right.
My brother my brother has that mind. My brother's an absolutely incredibly, he's a genius. My brother's a genius. My brother was doing stuff with NASA. He was like, my brother was inventing like some sort of LiDAR. I'm sure he'll correct me if I got this wrong, but I think this is what it is. Using satellite technology, I believe in LiDAR, to find out where the bamboo growth was in the rainforest, because it would help you figure out the age of things, where things were growing, and so it would help environmentalists.
Right.
So when I realized that I didn't have what it took to be my father, I can't really tell you how it made me feel, but I do know that it meant that I was sort of like adrift in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have a lot of other loves. I had been told that I could perform in front of people.
Yeah.
And I was told that I was funny and that so I was like, well, what the hell do I want to do? I didn't want to stick around in Northern Virginia. I didn't want to wait to have a job. I really wanted to get out there and make my own way. I wanted to start building something for myself. And my neighbor at the time told me about Second City in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's good enough. Let me go. Let me try. So I go to Second City and I get there in 2001. I get there in July of 2001.
Okay.
And I remember I was doing things like I was selling radio, commercial airtime.
Uh-huh.
I was selling like just real foot in the door.
Uh-huh.
The foot was in a door of a building that I never would have wanted to stay in.
Uh-huh.
I never really wanted to be there, but I did it anyway. And So then 2001 happened, and you know, we could spend the whole time talking about that, but I ended up having trouble getting a job, and I ended up working as a social worker in Chicago and meeting some nice people and stuff.
Yeah.
But like my whole attitude was this. I took on this like I think I call it the Batman attitude.
Okay.
Like, during the day, you work supporting yourself, and at night you save your soul. You go out, do fun things. So I did improv at Second City, and I later went on to do improv at Improv Olympic.
Mm-hmm.
But so what I did is I went from improv classes at Second City to writing classes. And then I heard about Kim Clark's class, and I was like, I want to try this. I want to like see, can I be bigger than what I am? That's when you and I met.
Yeah, because Kim had connections to Second City and had been on the staff there. A solo show.
Where?
At the corner of Chicago and Halsted, there used to be like there's like a building that used to have maybe the Chicago Center of the Performing Arts in it. And they had a class that was like an 8-week class to write a 1-person show.
So what was your solo show?
What was my solo show? So the night that I performed it, I got in the Filet of Solo Festival, and I performed it in my house. My apartment in Ukrainian Village got broken into. I had my solo show, and I was leaving for Japan, and in Japan I turned 26. So it was like I was right at the end of being 25 years old. I'd been in Chicago for a year. I have my first solo show going up, and a man with a butcher knife came through the bathroom window, stole all of our money out of our purses, like all of my yen, like all the. Remember how you used to go to the bank and get your currency before you went on a trip?
Joke's on that motherfucker. He's gonna have to get that shit converted. He's gonna get the fee.
So I remember the feeling of like the robbery, and then going to Japan and like getting my sense of safety back in Japan. And so many of my friends came to that show, and I remember how it felt to be in the show, but I don't remember the content. I don't remember what I wrote about. I just remember like everything else around it.
You had a lot of shit to deal with on that.
A lot of shit to deal with.
I will not blame. I think it makes sense.
And then Kim was at that show and said, you know, I think you should take this writing class. I think you should study with me.
Oh, so that's how you got invited.
That's how I got there. Yeah. Kim saw me. Yeah. Did you come to Kim with a book in mind, or did the book come out of Kim's class? Or I'm so curious.
I'm honestly trying to remember if we had to interview, and I think I had to sit down and interview. I think I remember now. It's funny, now that I'm talking to you, things are coming back to me.
Yeah.
What happened is I came to Armitage and whatever, and interviewed with, or just, you know, he interviewed me and said like, why do you want to do this class? And I think I told him, and then he said, you know, okay, you can come. And I think he said, let me ask other people how they feel about you joining the class. I think.
So weird.
Yeah. So I ended up getting there, and I didn't have a book in mind. I remember like just thinking I had a bunch of short stories, and I remember just saying like, I want to do something more. What I think it was now, although I don't remember if this is what it was then, was I think I just I felt like I was doing well at Second City, and I wanted to like take it to another level. And I wanted to see if I could do something a little bit on a higher level, because I was confident. I never really liked it. I still don't like seeming cocky or anything, but I felt like I was doing some good writing there. And it was like, I think it was not just that I thought they were coming out well. I think it was more that my writing that I was doing was kind of like giving me, I was like, wow, I'm really like, almost like I'm impressed with myself, but it was on a level where it was just like, wow, I'm really proud I did this.
Yeah.
And so I was like, let me honor my own feelings of being proud about myself, and like, see if I could do this see what happens if I do this on another level. Cause I think that's what it was too. I wanted to see I was like, am I just delusional? Like,
yeah.
am I good at
I'm
this? Or
not being like, yeah, you're delusional, but right. It's you get to a point where you're like, you have to see what else is in you if you stretch out of like the Second City sketch format, or like
yes,
how they teach you to churn out sketches. Like, how can you go deeper? How can you write longer pieces? How can you do, like, they kind of work broad. So how do you go like personal and focused?
kind of like that too. But I think it was also that I think that it was the first thing that I found because being my dad I was done. That wasn't going to happen. So I was like
Right.
looking for something. I was very, very hungry to find my own purpose. And I think that's why I went to Kim to do that thing. And then while I was with Kim, I remember I wrote a bunch of short stories. And I remember seeing to myself, like, is there a theme in all of this? Let me see if I can, like, flesh out the theme a little more, make it a little more obvious, and then connect all of them. And so that's what
Yeah.
I was doing. So okay, so I did the class, and then I think you took off before I did. So you were gone from Kim's class well before I was.
Yeah.
One of the things he told me before I told him, I said, "Hey Kim, I'm thinking about going to New York to try to make this work." And he told me, he said, "You're not ready." And I thought, well, this guy's just trying to schmooze his way out of getting me to do a couple more classes. I was very suspicious
Yeah.
because the way things went in that class, I was confused about what my purpose was there. But I remember him telling me, you know, you're not ready because you need to have a firm voice. And I thought to myself, I don't really know what that is. But when I got to New York, I was do so I was doing so I was doing I was living in the West Village,
Mm-hmm.
like in this apartment that a sister of my brother's friend was renting to me.
Yeah.
Huge. The room was huge. I was paying like $700 a month.
Wow.
But yeah, I was so lucky, and I was living, and I was trying to write the book, and I remember I was taking classes at the Magnet Theater in
Yep, I've
New
heard of
York.
it for sure. Yeah.
You have heard of it? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny. And
Because Magnet Theater and UCB were sort
yeah,
of the same era, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, and Magnet, and they were like right next to each other when I
Yeah.
was right close to each other. In living in the West Village, and I was like, I had been working as an admin assistant, like
Mm-hmm.
all that was like my gig, and I was still doing the Batman thing. During
Yeah.
the during the day, I do admin stuff, and at night I would do like creative stuff. And on a whim, I buy a magazine. I buy Time Out New York, and honestly, I'm never a big magazine guy, so I don't know why, but I turned to the book review section, and there in the book review section, it was basically my story idea.
Oof.
Somebody had done my story idea.
Yeah.
My story idea, the story of the book was kind of like deep sea creatures as a symbol for terrible events and experiences in your life.
Yeah.
And then there basically was my book. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And how the hell did this person, I was like, is my idea really, like, how did he think of my idea? And I was just
Yeah.
like, I was real disappointed. And I was in between improv classes, and I'm walking home, and I'm passing Houston and Second Avenue, and there on the blanket is a homeless lady, and she's selling oil paint. And
Hmm.
I figure, I like, this is cool. Like, let me. And I listen. I hadn't done art since high school.
Yeah.
So this was like 90. I hadn't done art since like 91, 90, and my teacher was not that. She wasn't very encouraging. She was a teacher that liked to point out what you did wrong. So
Mm.
I never really thought art was for me.
Yeah.
So I bought oil paint and I brought it home, and I didn't have any brushes, but what I had was this needle tool it was my mom's from high school, and it was the needle tool that you use for clay work. Have you ever done clay before?
Yeah. Yeah. My dad's a sculptor.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You know the tool, and it has the handle on it, and it's a needle, looks like an
Yeah.
ice pick.
Yep.
Yeah. So I had just brought that home because I think my mom was in process of cleaning out the apartment or our house, and she was going to sell it or something. So I brought it. I was going to just bring it home to photograph, because I was getting into photography.
Yeah.
But I thought, I wonder if I can paint with this thing. So I tried painting with it, and it actually worked out quite well because the
Hmm.
oil paint is clumpy. So
Right.
it sits on the end of the needle. So I started painting. So, like, also around that time, I had a bunch of movies that I really had never watched. And one of them was a movie called New York Stories. Now, New York Stories is a movie, it has three mini movies in it, one by
Yeah.
Scorsese, one by Woody Allen, and one by Coppola.
Mm-hmm.
Scorsese's is called Life Lessons, and it's like a fictitious movie about an artist who lived in New York. And it's done, Scorsese, hold on a second, sorry. I had never watched this movie, so I put it in, and so it stars Nick Nolte, and he's absolutely, this is my favorite movie.
Okay.
And even so, this is the part where this
Yes.
is my favorite movie,
The
but it's
favorites
not,
start bubbling up.
but it's, yes, there's a couple more after this.
Yeah.
So it's by Nolte, and he plays this artist called Lionel Dobie, and Scorsese does the movie. It takes place, I believe, in the 80s in New York, where he's living. Nick Nolte's Lionel Dobie is living in probably one of the villages, maybe
Yeah.
Lower East Side, and he's painting. And I just saw this artwork, and I thought, I really want to make this kind of artwork. It
Yeah.
was it was I don't know if it was immediate, but I know that it was one of those things where the timing was just, ooh,
Uh-huh.
like that kind of
Yeah.
timing. And I think to myself, oh my God, I really want to do this.
Yeah.
So I think this was, I don't know in which order it happened, if I brought the needle home or whatever, but I remember I have these canvases, and I was like, all right, let me try to make some artwork. And I remember like trying to draw. I had just taken some photos of um, Central Park, so I was like, let me try to do Central Park.
Yeah.
So I'm doing, huh?
I'm just,
Oh,
yeah.
so I'm doing Central Park, and I'm messing up all over the place. And then I'm like, maybe it doesn't have to be perfect. So I do a little Central Park over here, and the fountain's too big, but I'm like, let me just not care about that. So I turn the painting, and I do like the grass line over there, and then I do the skyline over here, and I had kind of been rotating it as I was doing it, and I'm like, I'm not going to care if I've done this perfectly. Let me just do it. So I finished that one, and I don't know if I painted it yet, but I finished it. So I'm like, let me do another one. And I'm like, what should I do? And then I remembered that when I was little, my mom used to make these to keep me occupied. She used to make these drawings of this giant octopus attacking,
Mm-hmm.
in a city line. So I did kind of an homage to her. And then I was uh I was finished with that one.
So you do the homage to your mom.
It was
So you
homage
do the
to my mom.
octopus ones and
After I did the one for my mom, I didn't know what to do next. But I looked at my stuff, and the octopus was a little closer to what I saw in that movie, but it still
mm-hmm.
wasn't quite it. And I was just wondering what to do. And then I remembered when I was in Chicago, I met a guy named Tristan, and he worked at a music shop.
Yeah.
And what happened is I heard there was this band called Long Wave, which I love. And I went in, and I said, look, man, I don't even know what this kind of music is called, but can you help me find music that sounds like these dudes? And he said, have you ever heard of Interpol? And I said, no. And he said, you need this album. And I remember putting the album on, and I remember being in the car with my girlfriend at the time. And I just remember saying over and over again, like, holy fuck, holy fuck. It was so ever since Milli Vanilli,
Uh-huh.
I've had a really hard time. I had a real hard time trusting music because what those guys did was it really just, I thought I'll never trust music again. Like it's all fake, you know.
Right.
But when I heard Interpol,
You were
I
back
was
in.
just, it was, yeah, that was my favorite, and they still are my favorite band of all time,
Yeah.
which is my favorite, but it's not the favorite I was going to talk about today. But
Right.
so when I was done with the octopus one, I thought maybe I could use music. So that band, for the first 7 years I listened to that album, it gave me chills. It was just so
Yeah.
powerful. And I thought, maybe if I just keep my intention on drawing like Lionel Dovey, but I listen to this music and let it affect me, maybe I'll get something done. So I remember I had a canvas in front of me. I closed my eyes, and I listened to the music, and I let the music sort of fill me with its emotion. And I remember I was like, let me not even look at my canvas. So I just started making these movements with my hands. And I remember opening my eyes, and I remember being filled with like the enjoyment of listening to that, the first song on Interpol,
Mm-hmm.
on that album. And I remember saying to myself, well, I made this line here and that line there. Where else could a line look good? And I was like, there. So I chose there. And then with those four spots, I remember choosing a fifth spot and a sixth spot. And I remember before I knew it, the pen was, it was, I, it took a little time, but the pen basically, it was more, so when I make art, it's a little bit like a discovery.
Yeah.
Like if this looks good there, and so what else would look good there? And so that's how I do it. So I remember then I had enough to paint with, or I had enough of an image to paint.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically what I did for the next, I mean, I know the rest of the time I was in New York. I mean, whenever I had free time, I was making artwork.
Yeah.
And I started getting shows.
Wow.
I got shows on the Lower East Side and Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx. And then I remember I got my first solo show in Brooklyn. And then, yeah, and then I think I was living with my girlfriend my girlfriend had actually moved to New York at the time. And then she said, have you ever heard of art therapy? Because
Mm.
she saw I was struggling, and she probably knew I needed help. And so she said, have you ever heard of art therapy? And I said no. And she told me about it. And I found a school that would accept me without having taken art classes. And
Yeah.
they looked at my portfolio. And then I got in there, and ended up graduating, getting my art therapy master's. And
Was that in New York still, or is that when you went?
yeah, that was in Westchester.
Okay.
When she told me about art therapy and I found out what I could do with it,
Mm-hmm.
it was, I think that was the first time I realized that the dream of being my father wasn't dead.
Yeah.
It reminded me of there's this desert area, I think it's in Arizona, where it's dry,
Mm-hmm.
really dry, except it rains once a year. And when it rains, flowers bloom and
Yeah.
plants come up. And it felt a little bit like that where I thought it was a dead thing. And then when she told me about this, I realized that I could get closer to being like
Yeah.
what my father did. So that was actually pretty amazing. Moved down to after I graduated. The deal was that we got married by that time.
Yeah.
So we moved down as per the agreement. We moved down to Miami so we could be, she didn't do well in cold areas.
Yeah.
So we moved down to Miami, and I was trying everywhere to get a job. And it was at the time I really couldn't even get a busboy job.
Oof.
I ended up doing a couple things. One was I volunteered with an organization called Art Studio Miami.
Yeah.
And we worked just giving art classes in the city. And the other thing I did was I volunteered with these artists who were pretty well established. And I would just go and do like paperwork for them, or I would make them lunch. it was cool. Like I got to see them work, and
Mm-hmm.
one was a textile artist who
Yeah.
really talented textile artist, and the other one's a photographer who's equally as talented photographer. And I mean, those guys, specifically the photographer, she really. I mean, when things with my wife and I fell apart in Miami, I mean, it was not very easy. I had a hard time living in that city anyway, and then when
Yeah.
it wasn't working out between she and I, this artist really helped me out. She was did more than she had to for somebody who was just volunteering with her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I still remember that. I still appreciate that. I'm the kind of person who really I need my job to be in place before I can do fun stuff.
Yep.
Once I have all my responsibilities taken care
Yeah.
of, I enjoy myself. So
You
I
need
did,
your Batman. You've got to you need the stability of the day job to have room to make the art.
if Bruce Wayne doesn't afford the mortgage on his mansion, he loses it, and they take the Batcave below because it's on the
Yeah.
property.
Yep.
So yeah, I really got to have my mortgage taken care of. So we end up divorcing, and I moved back up here, and I ended up getting a couple jobs. Well, first job I got was working at a school with kids on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also got a job after that was working at a school for kids with behavioral issues
Okay.
who had been kicked out of other schools.
Yeah.
And then I remember a dude I was in an improv troupe with said, I have a connection at GW Hospital. Would you like me to mention you? And I said, yeah. And I remember I got the job. And I remember it didn't feel like I was working. It felt,
Mm-hmm.
it felt like, well, the days would just pass. There weren't I didn't have the things that I would have, like, let's say when I was working for Coldwell Banker,
Right.
doing like real estate. And I didn't have it working at like when I was working in all those offices doing admin assistant stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it's real you're busy all day, but it's drudgery and the people might be assholes or it sounds like by the time you got to GW Hospital, there was more balance between your art and your profession or your soul and your education.
I mean, the job was all creativity.
Yeah.
I must have, so I did group therapy there. So I must have, I mean, I think I might have 1,500 experientials, art
Yeah.
therapy experientials, because
I need a definition. What is an art therapy experiential?
an art therapy experiential is an activity that you do which has a therapeutic goal,
Okay.
and you have someone engage in something creative, poetry, music, collage, drawing, painting. It's an excuse to have a conversation about the thing you need to talk about, and it's a wonderfully greased entryway into the thing that really needs to be spoken about. I guess that's a
Sure.
way to.
And it gets people in, they're moving, their hands are busy, they're creating something. It gives them a different way it's a different way to to articulate your emotions other than just the words,
It's not,
right?
yeah, it's not just the emotions. I mean, folks who were on the psych unit, it was a short stay, which means it was like typically 3 to 5 days, or at least it
Okay.
was supposed to be, because sometimes folks are there for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And there are things which the staff, your team, needs to see in order to feel comfortable releasing you.
Okay.
Of course, not everybody is able to do exactly what they need to do, but there has to be a level of safety which we all can agree upon before you are deemed safe enough to leave. Because the reason that folks are on the psych unit in the first place is because they're a danger to themselves or others, typically
Yeah.
to themselves.
Right.
And so people need to be able to articulate what it is they need to do so that they don't leave and attempt, well, complete suicide.
Yeah.
I think there's a pretty high percentage. The percentage is pretty high of those who leave the hospital and either attempt, Jesus Christ, either attempt or complete suicide. I think it's within the first 3 months.
Yeah.
So that's a real sensitive time. So my goal in doing an experiential was to help folks see exactly what the truth is. We all have an impression of ourselves, and we all think that we know the world. And one way to look at it is, in a lot of ways, our intuition is broken.
Mm-hmm.
Like folks on the unit more so than the average person. But even you and I, our intuition is not always accurate.
Yeah.
We will look at people and play a lot of, we'll take part in a lot of fallacies, future telling, mind reading, all of them, right? And so I love the philosophy where when somebody knows what the truth is, they fix themselves. I
Mm-hmm.
love that philosophy. And I find it to be really, really true. And so what I thought the most I can offer somebody on a unit in a short stay, because you don't get a lot of time, even in long-term therapy, it can take a while to actually get to a point. Oftentimes, it's actually 6 months before somebody trusts the situation, the situation, their feelings. It takes all that time for them to actually say the thing they need to say. And at that point, that's when the deeper therapy can start. So you're talking about 3 to 5 days. I mean, what I thought the most I can do is help people call out what the truth is. What they do with it after that is up to them.
Yeah.
Call out what the truth is. Talk about what their role in the truth is, or if they can even do it in the first place. And then allow other people to get it. Group therapy is really great because I am not the only therapist in the room in a way. The group itself it's like a group think.
Yeah.
And all the different organs in the group think play a lot of different roles. So, you'll have a lot of different kinds of characters in a group session. You'll have the regulator, you'll have the comedian. These are typically the type of people you'll find, the type of roles you find in a group therapy session.
So you'll plan for a day. So everybody in a group session on a Tuesday. It's Tuesday, it's 3 p.m. We're going to group. Everyone that day is going to work in clay while you talk, or is everybody going to do everybody's doing something different while they're in the group, or they're bringing a art that they made with you to the group to talk about?
So in this session, typically what would happen is I would say, I'll give a quick, and this was years ago, so I don't remember exactly how I ran it, but it was like, hey, welcome everybody to the group. Thank you for coming. Here are the typical rules of the group. Be sure to be courteous to other people. We don't want to have any side conversations so that we can give people our full attention. Think about how you would want to be treated in a group. We're all in this group together. Typically what we share in this group, we'll want to, if it's somebody's private information, realize that they may not want this broadcast to the other unit. So please be courteous. And then I think I said something like that. And then I would introduce the topic, and then I would say what kind of exercise we were going to do. We were all going to do it. And then I would say, we're going to, spend as much time on creating art. And then at the end, we're going to share. Your sharing is totally up to you. And if you want to do neither, at least stick around and listen to what other people have to say.
Mm-hmm.
One of the helpful things about having a group therapy is that you have 2 types of people that you can reveal yourself to. One is a professional, like myself, who's hired to be there. And then you got other people who typically people with a lot of trauma it depends on what type of trauma, but people sometimes would look at me and see someone who had to be there, who maybe didn't care as much about them or couldn't relate to them because they thought because I look a certain way, was a certain way, that I couldn't possibly have been through what they had gone through. And I would never try to defend or tell them they were wrong. That's what they needed to think. And so People were allowed to think that. But then you had folks who were in the group. Some folks knew each other from the outside, had
Mm-hmm.
grown up in the same area, had been through some of their experiences, chronic homelessness,
Mm-hmm.
drug addiction, things that I hadn't been through,
Right.
And so the thing about group therapy is sometimes the group does the work for you. I like thinking of it like this. Like I used to know this guy who has a coffee shop, and he used to say, I was like, hey, how do you know when, how was the day today? And he would say it was good because the shop ran on its own. He needed to have limited input. And that was often, I borrowed that because I thought that was really smart and it made a lot of sense. I
So when
didn't
the
need
group
to
ran
be,
on its own, it could be a successful day.
yes, where I wasn't micromanaging,
Yeah.
I was there to keep the boundaries, but I was also there to offer clinical speak on what they had just said.
Yeah.
So sometimes people will say, that person's paranoid because of X, Y, and Z. That's not actually what paranoia was. Folks had
Mm-hmm.
just learned that was the definition. So I would have a chance to say, like, this might not be paranoia because, all these different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always be there too to add the human element to it,
Yeah.
because being there was difficult for folks, especially when there was a stigma about being there, what
Sure.
people would think of them being there, what people would think about them sharing, and with some folks who showed up and they didn't want to share. That's why it was good that they were still there. They needed time to trust the
Mm-hmm.
process, and wouldn't have been very helpful if I would have forced them to share. So if folks wanted to stay and not share, they could stay as long as they weren't being disruptive. That's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. So yeah, so that's what the art therapy experience
Okay.
was, and that was basically my role in that.
And you're still doing art therapy today, but it sounds like you've moved on to a different role.
So I left the hospital and work at a community clinic, and I use art therapy when it's appropriate now,
Okay.
not necessarily as the main modality. These days, I'm practicing narrative therapy with an existential approach, and I add the creativity to it. And sometimes I found a way to do my experientials verbally
Mm-hmm.
instead of on paper. So there's a book I read, it's a really amazing book. It's called The Sacred and the Profane.
Mm-hmm.
It's by this guy named Marcia Eliade.
Yeah.
And in the book, he talks about when humans started. First of all, it's so complex. I mean, I think it's a book about when humans started to make some spaces sacred and others profane.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about the two types of people in the world, those who think of the world in a religious way and those who don't. And it talks about the birth of symbolism, the birth of objects. So what was a house? What was it originally used for? I mean, I think what that book says, it was originally this, it was originally a model of the universe. And it was supposed to be seen as this like machine almost,
Yeah.
um, where the way that so complicated to even talk about the different things that would happen in the universe. There was a place for that in the home. That was the first idea of the home. I believe I'm saying that right. It's a real heavy book. So I try to use a little symbolism from that, like the symbolism of the doorway, the symbolism
Mm-hmm.
of the bedroom, the symbolism of all of those things. And so when things come about that we can talk about, when things come about that relate to what the person's dealing with, I go into that mode.
So we've talked about how your favorite profession is art therapy, your favorite movie, New York Stories, your
Yes.
favorite band, Interpol.
Yeah. Mm.
Are there any other favorites that we have missed that you had noted down that you wanted to mention?
No, but there is one more thing that happened.
Yes.
Oh, probably maybe about 4 or 5 months after I worked at the hospital, I'm standing on the train platform, and I was talking to a friend of mine. I work at a restaurant where I make art in front of people. I'm standing with one of the servers at the restaurant. We're just talking, and I'm looking down, and I see these two sets of feet like plant themselves in front of me, and I look up, and it's a woman who had been on the unit and her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Yeah, how you doing?" She said, "Good." And her mother said, "Hi, I'm her mother. You really helped her. Thank you. You're a good man." And I was like, "Oh my God, I got it."
Oh,
It's like I was with my dad again, or I was
yeah.
my dad. And I remember just like looking, just sitting there, and mm, it was nice.
Yeah. What a gift. The the serendipity of seeing someone out in the world, out of context. You know, you didn't run into her at the front desk of the hospital, right? You didn't see her somewhere where you would expect to see a patient,
Mm-mm.
you know, and that she was able to place you because you can't always place people that you see at that most stressful moment of your life,
Yeah.
you know?
There's something nostalgic about looking back on that, being in Chicago, having to really find the extra energy to do the Batman thing
Yeah.
and to work all those jobs and run all over the city and be making terrible money, just trying to strive for happiness. And uh, I mean, when I look back on it, it really feels like there's nostalgia to it. I was like,
Mhm.
wow, I can't, like, I was so lucky to have struggled.
Yeah.
And like, I got to discover all those really great, I got Interpol, I got that Scorsese movie out of it. You should check that movie is,
Oh, I will. I'm going to watch it.
it's a great, so it's, yeah. So the Scorsese movie and even that book, even The Sacred and the Profane. I mean, I don't know that it's my favorite book, but it's definitely a book that it's a really it's a satisfying book.
Yeah.
Interpol and the movie, and got to live in the West Village.
That's
Like
amazing.
I'm and at the end I did get to do the thing my dad did, not at his level, of course, but just to just to have that experience, man. I consider myself very lucky.
Yeah.
Very.
What an amazing. It's one of those life stories that you look back and you see all the signposts and they like your path was clear in hindsight, but it wasn't clear when you were on it. Is there anything that you want to promote? Can people like when restaurants open up again, will you be doing live art or is that part of your
Oh, that's
are you still doing art? Are you still making art
so
for
I am making art at a restaurant called Palette 22 in Shirlington.
cool?
Uh, make it 2 nights a month, Fridays. You can I paint there, so people came around. I love having conversations about my art. If people see things on my art and they some of the best conversations I have is when people give me an opinion about what they see in my art.
Uh-huh.
Because the way I make art, which is like I just kind of let it, I just one move takes me to the next move, which takes me to the next move, often means that I don't know what's going to come next. And when the piece is between finalized and actually done being painted, like
Yeah.
all the shapes are on there, because that's how I do it. I draw and then I paint it. Uh,
Okay.
because I'm often left with shapes I don't know. And
Uh-huh.
it takes me some time to actually figure out what they are. But oftentimes I have to step all the way back. This is the great thing about working at a restaurant. I can put the art on the easel and step back possibly 30 feet and look at it from a distance.
Yeah.
and then I can actually see like what is that there? What would look good there? What color should I make that?
Yeah.
The thing that I made there is that actually part of the mountain?
I've never, I can't think of anywhere in Chicago that does that. It's such an interesting way to marry art and restaurants. And
It is.
Yeah.
And they had this idea to make art while you're, I don't know if they had the idea, but that's what we do at the restaurant, doing art while people eat. And people are encouraged to come up to the artists and speak to them. And,
yeah,
which happens all the time.
that's great.
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
So it's almost like an open kitchen. Like when a restaurant has an open kitchen.
I can see the connection.
Yeah.
I mean, you were asking me before. I mean, if there are other opportunities for folks who I can make art in front of their patrons, or that would be something I would take advantage of. Sure.
Great. And are you on Instagram or social media?
I have a Facebook page for my artwork.
Okay, great.
So it's Seth Yavit Paintings.
All righty. Great. Well, Seth, this has been a wonderful way to spend a Sunday night with a fresh COVID vaccine coursing through my veins, and catching up. It's been forever.
I agree. I appreciate the chance you gave to me to share my story. It's fun. We started together in a class that taught us how to tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've invited me to share my stories.
Yeah.
So it's a nice more serendipity, if you will.
Yeah. It's great.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.